business coaches, business attorneys, people like that, that anything that has to do with growth of your business, I want to create this community. And so if you want to know more about that, like I said, give me a call. My business card's over there, and then information's also on the forms that we're doing. So with that, like he asked about the SWOT analysis, it is a tool that a lot of businesses, corporations, large and small, do this. You can do it by yourself. How many of us are self-employed? It's just one of us. Okay, so SWOT can still be something that you can do for yourself, because as we are ourselves, we are our chief bottle washer, janitor, gopher, everything. And so a lot of times it's difficult to try to remember what all our strengths and weaknesses are. I know for me, I can sit there and I can rattle off everything that I can't do, things that I'm not good at, or things that I shouldn't be doing. I delegate to someone else. But sometimes it's really difficult for us to look within ourselves and find out our strengths. And so when you get to that hang up, get with someone else and say, hey, bounce some ideas off. I tell people, we're not in business for ourselves. We're not in business by ourselves, because we're in business for ourselves. And so it does take that community. I highly recommend people being involved in accountability groups or mastermind groups, which is different than networking groups. You can network and find your referrals, find your source for people to work with, but it's also important to have someone else that you can bounce ideas off of, because we can get so involved in our business that we get that frog in the well syndrome, where we look up and all we see is the sky being that big around, because that's all we see at the top of the well. Sometimes it takes someone to kind of pull us up out of the well, and you look around and go, oh crap, that's what I've been missing out on. So don't get so involved in your business that you forget to expand out and ask for other people to help you. A big proponent of having a coach. Does anyone have a business coach that they work with on a regular basis? You need to get a coach, at least someone that you can look up to, that maybe has been in a position like you, that has been through the growth of a business. And someone that you can be accountable to, can help you walk through different aspects. So with that, we're going to start with the SWOT, because what we do is we work with a SWOT. That helps us determine our different strengths and weaknesses, and then from that, then we can determine our goals. So we're going to do the SWOT first, and then we'll work on the SMART goals. So we want to do it as an actual workable exercise, not just another 2x2 matrix that you do and then set off to the side. This can be something that can be workable. So we want this to be interactive. If you have an example that you want to use, feel free, or if you want to do it individually on yourself, I've got a couple extras. If you want to do it for maybe a couple different action items, you can do that as well. And then if you need this as a document, let me know. I can send a PDF to you so you can use at other times. So we're going to talk about SWOT. And our SWOT is our strengths, opportunities, weaknesses, and threats. So for our strengths, we're going to capitalize on those. Those are the things that we figure out what we're good at, and we're going to capitalize on them, right? Our weaknesses, we're going to shore up. We're going to figure out how we're going to, prop those up, get someone to help us out with those. Opportunities, of course, we're going to invest in, and threats we need to identify. And there's different ways of doing that. A lot of people don't like looking at weaknesses as a negative. You have people that are all about positive thinking, which is great. And so if you want to, you can look at weaknesses as being an area of improvement, if you don't want to have that negative connotation on there. So I want to talk about that as being an area of improvement, or actually an area of opportunity even. Okay? So does anyone have an example that they want to maybe work through with a SWOT analysis? They want to have something that they're kind of working through and want to use this. If not, we'll just kind of do it generically, okay? For the strengths, like I said, sometimes it's very difficult for us to look upon ourselves and find out what we're good at. And we're talking about things other than, okay, I'm good at math, or I'm good at, I've got people skills. We're talking about things that can actually increase your bottom line. That's what we're here for in our business, is to make it success. So we're looking at strengths that's going to help you realize these are things that I can capitalize on and that is different from others in our field. So for a graphic artist, to be able to say that you have all the knowledge of graphic design, you want to maybe find out another strength that is different from someone else in your field. So that's where you capitalize on those differences, okay? Same thing with the weaknesses. You have to be honest with yourself and don't just pick yourself apart. Like I said, a lot of times it's that the pros and cons, your long list of weaknesses can be sometimes 5 to 1 to your strengths. And that's where I say it's very important to get someone else to kind of help you with that. So with your weaknesses, find out what your weakness is, maybe compared to where you feel you should be. Maybe you don't have as much technical skills as you would like to have. Perhaps you're not as outgoing when you're doing networking. You feel like you just kind of want to shrink back and be a wallflower. That would be a weakness when it comes to networking. So let's talk about different strengths and weaknesses that people have, especially being solopreneurs. What are some strengths that you feel that you have in your business?
I would say my strengths would be that I'm detail-oriented and I try to be thorough.
Okay.
But that can backfire on you.
Right, because you can get too wrapped up in that, become OCD on your detail-oriented.
As far as my weaknesses, I can write well, but I don't write well quickly. It takes me a long time to compose an email.
Okay.
I mean, it takes me much longer time than it would take someone else to compose an email. So in that instance, I would think as a business owner, it would be beneficial for me to hire someone to take care of that weakness for me. Like,
right.
Not that I can't do it, but it consumes so much of the time and takes me away from doing other things. But that's why, that's my thought.
Right, and that's where that's showing up and finding out. Those are some areas that you can then delegate out. And I'm huge on delegating. I delegate cleaning my house if I have the money to. I mean, that's something I'd much rather go out and make money than sit there and clean my house, right? Anyone else talk about weaknesses and strengths?
I've got a lot of the, this is a good idea, but not so much in the, I won't quantify how good an idea it is.
Okay, so you're good at coming up with the ideas. So you're an idea guy, which is good, but not necessarily everybody that has a great idea is the one to implement that idea. So the weakness might be someone in finding out how to actually put that idea into action, right?
Well, I sort of stumbling along with that. I stumbled a little faster than I was last year. But
are you missing the analysis part, or are you missing the follow-up part?
there is so much data that has to be mined to get an idea of what the various markets are, because there's so many markets that are plugged into. And it's hard to make a pitch for everyone in particular.
Right, so that sounds like you're sort of analytical and then gets overwhelmed by the analysis.
Well, it's not so much that I'm overwhelmed by the analysis. I got all kinds of data that I go through, I read, I try and find out what market segments are going on so fast. I have this gut feeling that if I came up market and go for a few units with a relatively high profit margin in the front end, that could lead to any number of different places, including classic feedback about features. But it still doesn't tell me where I'm going to drop 1,000 or 3,000. Where that's going to be. I know eventually that somebody's going to want to know. And fortunately, I'm not the only one who's dealing with housing. And a lot of people in the markets. Which demographic to go after, the retirees who need a place, or the students who need a place, or the kids who can't get a regular mortgage because they just got out of college.
Right.
The housing markets.
Well, I guess it would be a good problem.
Right, yeah, say not all problems are bad problems, so yeah.
They're all opportunities.
They are opportunities, yeah, so that's where you need to figure out then on some of these strengths that you have and how to make that into an opportunity. We'll talk about that in just a second. Anyone else have anything on strengths and weaknesses? Keep in mind, with the strengths and weaknesses, make this in black. These are internal. These are things that we have control over. or our strengths and weaknesses, okay?
How about this one? I'm analytics, but I'm analytic.
Right,
It's
and I
a
do
strength
understand
and
what you mean by that.
weakness. You get stuck in the analysis.
Right, so that's something that's internal, that's something that's your personality that you have control over to an extent, even though it's your personality trait to be analytical. Opportunities and threats, these are things that are external. These are things that we do not have control over, but we can control the impact. We can control how we react, and we can control how it reacts or how it impacts our business, okay? So with the internal aspect, these are things that can come with the different, like we were talking about, all the different ideas and who is in control of the different aspects. So with some of these strengths and weaknesses, you're going to try to figure out ways of incorporating customer service, surveys, I should say. We have employee feedback, so if you did have an employee, we're going to find out your strengths and weaknesses by asking your employees. We're going to actually ask even your different processes. So this is here again is someone that you would maybe from the outside had come and help you look at from the outside in on your processes and see if, you know, if it's something that they see a hiccup that you think that could be a little bit more ways of improvement, okay?
So something that's important to consider about strengths is where do you have a competitive advantage in your business?
Right. So that's what I said, in finding out your strengths, not so much just that you can add or you know the difference between red and blue, but things that are really going to impact your business that's different from your competitors. Yeah, absolutely. So it's, like I said, it's sometimes a little more difficult to find out and figure out your strengths.
If
So
there's
that's what
some, you know, competitive situation that everybody has, then it might be a weakness that if you focus on that and everybody can have it.
and that can be an opportunity then that you can go and take a part of and say, this is something that we need to invest in. So yeah, absolutely. For the external, for these things that we don't have control over, your different opportunities and threats, what are some opportunities that you see could be a part of a small business that would be part of growth? You know, whether it's, you know, like developing another product line.
Ability to be more nimble about what markets you do go into.
Right. And being careful to not have that blue shiny syndrome. That's one of my, that can be a strength, but it can also be one of my weaknesses where I can have trouble not focusing on what it is I really need to focus on.
Yeah, that's good. Well, I was saying, I'm not sure where to aim, but I want to have a credible narrative to back up where I do go. Based on that.
Right, yeah. With our external, we need to consider our secondary, like this internal are all primary aspects. So the external is secondary. So we need to keep in touch with things that, like I said, are not in our control, but things that impact. So we're talking about things like environment. And I don't mean, you know, well, it can be weather, but sometimes it can be mortgage rates, the money, what it's worth, what's that called? How it's worth compared to the euro and things like that.
Exchange rate.
Exchange rate, thank you. Your environment, your industry, data, and like I said, especially when it comes to your competitors, finding out things that, finding out what your competitor is doing, some new product or some new aspects, new software, things that have to do with your industry data, okay, things that you might not have control over that can definitely impact your business. And then, yes, competitors. I used to think that I was not competitive until someone told me I was the most competitive person that they knew, and I argued with them. They're like, ding! Yes, you can be very competitive and it can be a good thing, as long as you don't, like your whole goal about your business is not to take out the competitor. You know, and that's where networking can come into play, where you figure out how you can work with your competitor. And as far as business, yes, it's good to have competitors because that way that shows that you have a value. There's a reason for your business because there are competitors out there. But then finding out what you can do that differentiates you from the competitors. That's one of the best parts about my business and branding and marketing is finding out how to differentiate, and that's a gain for me, you know, in working with businesses that way. So when you go through this and you find out all your different strengths and weaknesses, and you have everything written down, you find out different opportunities. And this, like I said, that can be a fun part where you can be kind of carried away again and finding out, ooh, I can do this, and I can do that, and look, there's this, and then as you're looking for something else pops up, and you can figure out, oh, I can incorporate that. So be careful on those opportunities. But then also on the threats and figuring out things you might not ever realize could happen, like with Katrina. That's a threat that no one could ever predict, but you have to identify that things can happen like that depending on where you live, or depending on... Yeah, exactly, and having those things, having your plan B, C, and D in order to have, you know, be prepared for some of those things, or at least know what to do if something was to happen. You know, you can't really be prepared and at least have a plan in action. So once you get all of these things done, then what? You're done, right? No. That's where the fun begins, where you start putting things into action. And so once you flush out and prioritize, especially your different opportunities, figure out what one is going to be the best for you to start out with. Figure out your ideas, the strengths of how the different ones can offset. So your strengths, you can figure out how to offset your strengths and your weaknesses. Okay, so like with me, I'm not a number person. So I have a bookkeeper that I work with for my weaknesses. So that's something I don't have to stay up at 2 o'clock in the morning and try to find that $7 in my bank account. You know, I can use that time somewhere else. You can also even use your strengths to offset the different opportunities too. Finding out your strengths to know which opportunities to focus on. So you're not just going off on some bunny trail. Figure out which ones are actually the best for you to focus on first. And then you find your opportunities that offset your threats too. So if you have an opportunity to expand for a new product, or an opportunity to learn a new program, then that's going to be maybe offset a threat of not being more on top of things that are coming new age. You know, there's new programs and new avenues of social media and everything like that every day. People ask me how I keep up. I'm like, who said I do? Because there is something new every time you turn around.
And I think you're bleeding between strengths and weaknesses now.
I'm sorry, say it again?
Bleeding, you're talking now about something that was kind of internal, learning your own skills. I'm thinking opportunities of allies, business allies.
Absolutely.
Is something to put down in that opportunities with competitors.
Yes, and I said that's
so
something.
So those are external and you can take advantage of them.
Yes.
Try to find them.
And use them to help shore up some of your weaknesses.
Hmm?
Use them to shore up some of your weaknesses to help
Yeah,
develop them.
that too.
Right.
Just as a for instance, most of my focus is on the price of build inside of the company. I don't care so much about the entire unit. At the start,
Somebody else is handling the external part.
everybody else is handling the external part, and I can sell to them my internal part.
So you segmented yourself into a way in which you get allies to your industry.
And I've found a half a dozen people who are pumping these things out at a relatively reasonable rate, but they don't do anything except, here you go, now go find the table and the chairs and everything else.
So marketing segmentation is actually a way to take advantage of turning some competitors into allies by separating yourself out from their exact market space into a subspace that they don't really handle.
Right. A lot of people, that's where you can hire out, or at least figure out ways of another business to work
There are
with.
people who are already doing stuff like that as their primary business.
Yes.
Or as a part of their primary business. They'll get it cheaper. So maybe I get a little override on where it comes to my business for them, and they buy from me to complete their product.
Right, and that could be a whole other opportunity when you create an affiliate program with someone else. So, right, yeah, see how that kind of all works in, even though it might consider it a weakness, finding out that opportunity to where, you know, you don't have the time or the knowledge to do some of that market research.
In my case, geography is a severely limiting factor because it's expensive to get these units moved across the highways. If there's something already up there, my flat pack stuff can arrive at a fraction of the cost of moving what they've got there.
Right.
So,
Figuring out ways to drop ship. I mean, when I had my craft store, it was hard to compete again with competitors with Hobby Lobby and Michael's and Archivers and places like that because they got things in barge load. I got things by a box. And being able to say, well, I can drop ship that directly to you. You know, so that was, even though I didn't get to have, shouldn't say it like that, even though I didn't have to bother with having that inventory, I was still able to provide that and being able to drop ship that, and provide that service, still provide that, you know, one-on-one service, which is what my business is based on, versus going to Hobby Lobby or something and talking to a 17-year-old that had a job because the mom told them they had to. That's where my business was able to come back in and say, hey, yeah, I don't have that in stock, but I can get it to you in 2 days, and I can still help you with that more personal care. So yeah, figuring out, this is not a process that you can sit and do in a couple hours. Trust me, this is an ongoing, this is a working organism that is going to be constantly changing and moving and shifting, especially as different threats when it comes to different economy. Right now with the election coming up, a lot of businesses are on hold, holding their breath, waiting to see, especially in the medical device companies and anything to do with healthcare. They're just kind of just sitting around waiting for the election. So that's a threat for them to figure out, you know, whichever way you want to think of it, pros and cons, the different things are coming. And so then, here again, that's an external force that we can't really, we can vote. That's about the only way that we can really have any kind of impact right now. But that's something that's a threat that we don't know until it comes to that time. And so being patient. Oh, I said patient. Yeah, I'm probably the most impatient person that you know. So, when it comes to SWOT also, if you take a look at this, it is two-sided. And so like on the front is where you have room for your strengths and weaknesses and your brain dumping of all the different ideas for your opportunities and threats. And I've got examples, I've got ways to kind of help you go through that process. And then on the back side, there's even more information, different questions to ask yourself to help prompt if you get stuck. And so, I've been talking about weaknesses. Finding out what your customers complain about. That's where that customer survey can come in very, very handy. You know, how many of you have done a customer survey with your business? That's something that I highly recommend. There's all kinds of even free surveys. You can do SurveyMonkey for free, and there's others out there that are copycat formats. Factors that cause you to lose sales. You know, finding out, you know, like what you said, where you're geographically located. Maybe that's a hang-up. And finding out if there's a way that you can connect with someone else. And then on opportunities, I love, you know, what changes in social patterns, population profiles, lifestyle changes, things like that, local events, finding out all the different opportunities. And you think, wow, if I take all the time to do all of this, I'm not going to have time to actually work on my business. Like I said, this is a process. This can take some time to really do. Don't sit and think you can do it in a couple hours, because you're not going to get the full benefit of it unless you do really take the time, you invest the time, and invest in maybe someone else, even a market research company, and finding out someone that does have that strength to their business and helping you with this. And then, of course, the threat, and the biggest one thing, what is a threat? What is an obstacle that you come up with your business? Not so much in the past, you know, consider that. Threat, yeah, lack of money, lack of funds, that's the number one threat for every business.
Cash flow.
Cash flow, lack of it, you know, especially with the SBA loans and everything being non-existent. Banks, you when asking for a loan, they laugh at you, you know, that's a threat. So being able to find out in other ways, angel investors, VCs, and places like that, figure out where you can come in and shore up your different weaknesses when it comes to that lack of cash flow, okay? Any questions on the SWOT analysis or on this form itself? If you think of any, feel free to contact me and let me know. I've used this for different businesses, everything from dog trainers to nutritionists. So this works for just about any business and any size business. Okay? Now, like I said, when you figure out what your SWOT, what your strengths, weaknesses, and everything are, that's then where you figure out what your goals are. You use your strengths and weaknesses to establish your goal. Okay? So what is a goal? How do you define what a goal is?
I hate goal setting when it was involved with my job.
A goal is a four-letter word. I mean, you gotta give it that, right?
And partly because I felt like I could never attain that goal. I mean, I felt like I was failing before I even started.
Mm-hmm. So you were thinking too big picture. Because it just came too
I think I was
overwhelming.
thinking just too many, all the things that could go wrong.
Yeah.
The threats were too great. Like I didn't know how I could overcome some of those threats.
Mm-hmm. So you probably started on the goal before you actually even did the process of the strengths and weaknesses to figure out how to even create your goal. So that's where you come back and kind
My
of do a
frustration
couple
was
steps
the
back.
stuff that was coming from engineering was incorrect.
Uh-huh.
And so I was at their mercy. I was going to pass it on
Shocker.
until it was perfect because I'm that perfectionist.
Yes.
And so I was at their mercy, you know, their timeline, when they were getting it, whatever. And then I've got manufacturing out here telling me to get started on this new project. So that was trying to get everything ironed out before releasing it to production.
Right.
And try to assign goals to that. I was incapable of doing that, so I did not do that. So that's why this was really important.
Oh, good, good. Well, one of the online dictionary, I think it was dictionary.com, said a goal is a result or achievement toward which effort is directed or aimed. Okay, so there is action involved in creating a goal. It's not just putting something out there. Yeah.
As opposed to daydreaming.
As opposed to daydreaming, yeah. I mean, that's you've heard maybe the phrase of a goal without an action plan is just a dream. So yeah, you can daydream all day long. Believe me, I can daydream. But without that actual action plan, without that effort direct towards that goal, it is just a dream. The goal is a 1 to 3 year action statement. Okay?
That sounds powerful.
So it's an action statement. It's more than just saying, I want to make more money. We all do, right? We want that magic pill that can just go and solve us and, you know, give us the winning lottery ticket numbers. Well, even if we did say that, I want to win the lottery, there's actual action statement around winning the lottery. You have to go to the store and buy a ticket, right?
You have to at least buy a ticket, right?
I'm sorry.
I'm going to work overtime in order to earn more money. Or I'm going to take a second job in order to earn more money. Or I'm going to fire the cleaning lady so I can save that money if I don't have money.
Right. Right. So with the SMART, like what Bob had said earlier, there's lots of different things that the S stands for. I like the specific and the simple. Try to keep it simple. The KISS method is important here. Keep it simple, sweetie. Because if you get too overwhelming, then you won't do it. You won't take the actions to create your goal because it's going to be too overwhelming.
Slight description from my point of view. I know people who, if you tell them here and there, they don't know what's in between.
Mm-hmm.
So if you make here and there, and then 6 or 8 different mileposts along the way, how to get there, you're sort of telling them how to drive and telling them the route plus the destination.
Mm-hmm.
But I know that it's easy to find here and there and a giant chasm in between the two, unless there's a few in-betweens to tie you here and there.
Absolutely. And that's where that action statement, so it is a roadmap, especially incorporating in your weaknesses and threats where you would be prepared for that big old speed bump that you're going to hit along that road.
That's as opposed to my wife's directions and description of where we're going. So you can tell me where we're going or how to get there, but please not code.
Right. Right. And so that's that analytical mind. I'm sure Patrick can give you directions compared to just how to get there as far as even how the car works when you turn it on. I mean, I've known some of those very analytical people that, what time is it? They go into the whole definition of how a clock is made. You know. So yeah, you can get wrapped up on that. So yeah, be careful with your specific ideas so they don't get overwhelmed. So that's why I say keeping it simple. Okay. They're measurable and meaningful. I actually even like meaningful better than measurable. Measurable is important. We're going to talk about that. But if your goal isn't meaningful to you, is it really going to work? You have to have passion in whatever it is that you're doing. And I am one of these that have learned that over the last few years. It's been probably my biggest life lesson over the last 5 years, that if things are not meaningful to me, they don't mean anything. I mean, that sounds trivial, but it has to be a part of what your internal compass tells you that you are to do.
Meaningful to someone.
Meaningful to someone is not necessary enough. I mean,
I will say customer base.
customer base, right? And that's, yes, of course. But so the meaningful is not necessarily your customer. It's going to be that it's important to you to make your customers happy. Okay.
Yeah.
I'll use the example. How many of you ever tried to quit smoking? Okay. Did it work for your wife to nag you?
No, but it sure did for the kids.
Okay. So it was meaningful for your kids to understand, or for them to understand and love the process of you quitting smoking. You had to want to quit smoking. That had to be meaningful to you. It wasn't enough for someone else to nag you to quit.
Yeah.
Okay. And A is actionable and attainable. Now here we go, that action plan again, that action statement, that also has to be attainable. So to say we want to win the $1 million lottery, it's possible, yes, but what are the odds? You know, figuring out the different odds and having just how attainable is that winning lottery ticket, especially if you don't want to go out and buy one. And then realistic and relevant. Make it realistic to where, yes, if you're, like you mentioned about geographically located in different places. You know, if I want to learn how to ski down a mountain slope and I live in Austin, unless I have a very nice plane that can take me to all the different places where I can learn how to ski down the slope, that's not very realistic.
Skateboard.
Skateboard, yeah, I've tried skateboarding, you don't want to see me on one of those.
Yeah.
Right?
And since we have towels, we could simulate.
Right.
It's like a sumo suit.
And then relevant kind of ties in with meaningful. It has to be relevant to your business, it has to be relevant to your own personal statement even. If it goes against your moral compass, that's not going to work. And I had an interview with a financial consultant a couple, 3 months ago, right after I started my talk show. And he said, yeah, he made a load of money. And he should have gone to bed happy every night because he was making all this money hand over fist. I realized he hated every minute of it because it went against the process that he was doing, went against his moral compass. To where he had to decide if he was going to do something that was more meaningful, more relevant to what his personal goal was, or, you know, it was a tough decision for him because his wife was like, hey, she liked the money coming in, but then he shared with her that he didn't like it because of these different reasons. That made it more relevant for him to shift his direction in his business. So it has to be meaningful and relevant to what your own purpose in your business, but here again, especially since we're all entrepreneurs, solopreneurs here, it's important to be relevant to our own personal compass as well. And then time-bound or trackable. It has to have a way of you figuring out the different speed bumps or the different mileposts that you're going to have in keeping you on track. This is your accountability aspect, not only for yourself, but with your business. Here again, it's where it's important to sometimes have a coach that will help you keep this trackable. If you have trouble, like I have no sense of time whatsoever, I have to set a clock to get me from getting up from the computer. And I set it in the other room, so I have to get up and turn the timer off, because I have no sense of time. So this is one that is very, very important for me to be trackable in my time.
Entrepreneurs think that ABD.
Yes, yeah.
And when the person has ABD, there are two kinds of time. Now and not now.
Uh-huh.
That's a fact. It's the way we look at time. And I found out when the compiler first came out, I got one, and all of a sudden I realized I didn't have to remember anymore. I just had to remember to run.
Yes.
And as soon as I put it in, and somebody reminded me. So I wrote the letter to the guy who signed it, and I said, "You about to go back to work." And he wrote me back and said, "Thanks, I never thought of it that way."
That's true.
But ever since then, that's,
Yeah, that's it.
it's gotten a lot more centralized, but that really helps. Phone apps, things like that.
Oh, yeah.
Keep you on track.
Yeah, I found a new app the other day. It's called Shoebox, where I can scan in. I take a picture of all my receipts. My bookkeeper's constantly getting after me not having receipts. It's like also in my credit card statement.
There's a bunch of those.
There is. Shoebox is free, so I like it on that aspect.
The one I've got hooks up directly to QuickBooks.
Uh-huh. But there are several out there. So yeah, that's another one of those things that it's easy to get involved in and figuring out your accountability and just doing it. It's easy. You already have the receipt right there. It's easy to go ahead and just take a picture. So when you're creating your goal statement, when you're creating your action statement for your 1 to 3 year goal, it's important to start it with a verb. That's that action. Increase, decrease, words like that that's going to create that action plan. Okay? That strategy improvement, even improving, is an action word. Figuring out that thing that's going to really fire you up, that's going to make it meaningful to you. Okay? For me, every year I have a word that's kind of like my mantra for that year. So like last year, my word was being more authentic to myself, being authentic to who I was, what I was supposed to be. And this year is my year of balance, where, like I said, I can sit in front of my computer and I can work 24/7. Well, let's call it work on a lot of things. Because I can get off on that bunny trail too. Like, oh, I'm on Facebook 4 hours later. Oh crap, I haven't done this yet. So I have to keep myself time bound on a lot of things. But keeping those words, especially being in marketing, I'm a journalist major. So words, if they're meaningful to you, finding out the ones that really would light you up and keep you on target. Okay. I'm going to use. Does anyone have an example that they want to maybe walk through on a SWOT goal? If not, I have one ready. If you don't have one, to look like. Okay, I got one. We're going to increase, okay, customer satisfaction. By 10% by end of 2013. Okay, so does this meet all the SMART goal requirements?
Starts with the verb.
It's specific, it starts with a verb, right? Is it specific, it's simple enough? Does it make sense? It's measurable. We're going to increase this customer satisfaction. It's measurable by 10%.
How do you measure customer satisfaction?
That's when you get your customer surveys and things like that, that feedback. And then here's our time by the end of 2013, okay? So here's our action plan. So with that, we're going to figure out how to create this into a plan by figuring out who's going to be responsible. That's another A, is that accountable. Sometimes putting that name to it. So if I have this board of directors, maybe I need to be, say, in charge of Tom. Put that action or the accountable person on this as well.
Would we need to define customer satisfaction to be able to say whether you?
Right, and that's what we're getting into, absolutely. Figuring out what that customer satisfaction is, figuring out, here again, on your strengths and weaknesses, where your weakness is. What is it that customers complaining about that you want to increase?
What is it that you quantify gets you 10%.
That's the measurable aspect of figuring out what it is. And it can be dependent, if you want to throw out an example, you can kind of go through, maybe on shipping products from your online store. You know, people are complaining that the product isn't what is described on your website. So I'm finding out, so that's where I'm actually kind of working with this, to where you want to reduce errors. It's going to be one of your ways to increase your customer satisfaction. You reduce errors to 1 out of 100. Okay, so keeping that accountability in mind, this is something that your customer survey is going to help you, and your customer service department is going to be in charge of. Okay, so that's going to be one of the ways to reduce your customer satisfaction, is reducing errors. Another way is resolving issues. So again, another action word, you're going to resolve the issue of tickets, return tickets, or errors in order tickets. You know, anything that's going to be an error that people complain about, it's going to be a little bit different than maybe your product sales. Okay, so this is something that maybe the IT department is in charge of. So keep getting them involved in this aspect. Okay, so that's where you need to figure out what your accountability, what team member's going to be in charge of, or if it's just you, you're again figuring out maybe at what part of the day you're going to tackle things like this. And that's where that time management can come in. That's a whole other seminar. And I have someone that could actually be a very good speaker of that too. Mara Thomas, if you don't know her, she'd be an excellent on time management. So with this, we can even niche it down some more and say we're going to work on our process. Marker's drying out. So we have a process to reduce your errors. And we're also going to have a process in order to figure out what these errors are, figuring out what your matrix is on that. We're going to figure out a system to track. And we're also going to have, maybe this can be a form, maybe a new aspect to your website, or having a database that's going to call your customers. You know, there's different ways of tracking your system and processes. And then for your IT department, you know, it could be something as simple as having feedbacks, keeping track of your UPS tracking, things like that. But that's not necessarily something that you would be in charge of, and that's that outside source. Okay. Questions on this when it comes to making this into the action plan, niching it down? I kind of went through this really, really fast. I know it's. Okay, so this can be a process that takes a while. And that's where, you know, I have this SMART goal picture on my wall at my desk, to where I can actually kind of keep me focused and keep me to where I'm, okay, where am I at? Have I gone through all the different aspects? Is this goal something that I can measure? Is this something that is realistic and relevant to what my business and what my goal is? You know, is it trackable? And then if it's not, if any one of these aspects is not part of what my goal is, then I need to redefine it or figure out it's something I even need to really work on and focus on. Maybe it's something I need to put off to the side until I get more information or get someone else that can help me with a certain aspect. That makes sense? And so it's easy to come up with all different kinds of ideas, especially when we're solopreneurs and saying, I can do this, I can do that, and you know, I said.
But then when you put it all together, can you really do all that?
Can you really do that?
Time in the day to do all of that.
Exactly. And that's where sometimes even a SMART goal can be in the time management aspect of saying, okay, the measurable, do we have time? You know, is there a way of being able to measure that time and keep it trackable and still have time to have a life? You know?
For how long will it take?
Right, and that's that measurable aspect to where, you know, finding out all different ideas to figure out who else can come in and help you with it. I'm big on, even though I love being a solopreneur, I love being my own boss, but I've had to realize, especially in the last couple of years, that I can't do it all on myself. You know, it's just too much to try to do, and wonder why I'm digging one hole while I'm filling up another with crap. You know, I'm wondering why I'm not making any ground. So, any questions on either the SWOT or the SMART goals? Is that helpful? Did it clear up? Did you kind of answer some things you had on the process?
It's helpful to hear about ways of focusing that our system does. Because I think when we go home and we're back running off on all the different groups that we get pulled in.
Mm-hmm.
And this is great because if something stick out, and even if I can get it next week, part of it's there.
Right.
And I didn't see the picture. That's one of those things that could make it better screensaver.
Like I said, I can send you the image if you want to, you know, and I'm sure Bob can probably create another smart direction of that. I like this one. There's a lot of them out there. I like this one because it was more picture-ish than just the text. You know, I'm a very visual person, so I like having the actual pictures.
I like icons.
Yeah.
And when I do a report, I like throwing a lot of little graphics, text graphics.
Right.
It gets the younger people to read the whole thing.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Any other questions for on this or on anything that I can answer as far as
Do you have any resources that you can pass along?
There are a lot of different resources out there. I mean, YouTube, of course, is one of the better ones that, I mean, creating ideas on how to create the, especially when it comes to the SWOT analysis, because that is so important to do first. And keeping that in mind and keeping that constant. Because you're going to come up, especially with threats. Threats are going to be bombarding you all the time. And then keeping you focused where you're not out there and coming up with all these different opportunities as well. YouTube is a great resource. Anyone else? Thank you. Thank you so much, Mom, for giving me this opportunity to share this with you.
Thank you for sharing.